Welcome back, everyone. Whether you're a university political science student analyzing the nuts and bolts of state building, or just someone who's totally fascinated by how power and identity intersect, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're bringing some high-stakes, investigative energy to a really deeply entrenched systemic flaw: the ethnicization of regional security in Nigeria. You know, since Nigeria's independence in 1960, we've watched this massive, complex pendulum swing in regional security policies. We went from a strictly centralized federal police force, which was meant to unify this newly formed nation, all the way over to localized defense structures. In this explainer, we are going to decode how those local structures, which were originally intended to be a community shield, can inadvertently morph into weapons of division.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to picture this scenario. It's midnight on a dark, isolated Nigerian highway. Your headlights suddenly wash over this makeshift barrier in the distance. The glow of flashlights cuts through the dark as a checkpoint approaches. Now, as you slow your vehicle down, the tension-filled question zooming through your mind isn't just whether your papers are in order. The real, critical question is, who is standing guard? Are the men holding the rifles actually protecting the national constitution? Or are they enforcing the will of a local, ethnic faction? This visceral, real-world scenario, it's a daily reality for many, and it's the exact tension we're investigating today. Here is our investigative framework for today's explainer. First, the checkpoint paradox. Second, meritocracy versus tribalism. Third, homeland power monopolies. Fourth, invisible social borders. Fifth, the cost of division. And finally, a unified security model.
Let's start with Section 1, the checkpoint paradox, when the shield becomes a boundary.
So, security is meant to protect, right? But what actually happens when the uniform represents a tribe and not a nation? Look, in a highly functional, unified state, security personnel are bound by an absolute, unwavering loyalty to the national constitution. They are literally the ultimate shield for everyone within the country's borders. But when local or homeland security structures start drawing their recruits based on ethnic ties rather than strictly professional standards, well, that ideal shatters. The officer at the checkpoint becomes way more loyal to local ethnic interests than to the whole concept of national unity. And suddenly, that protective shield, it's inverted. It becomes a territorial boundary meant to keep the quote-unquote others out.
Moving right along to Section 2, meritocracy versus tribalism, the recruitment divide.
Let's look at meritocracy, which is security recruitment based strictly on competence, professionalism, discipline, and loyalty to the national constitution. Following independence, early Nigerian federalist ideals heavily emphasized this specific approach. Why? To forge a cohesive national identity out of incredibly diverse regions. Now, for those of you studying public administration or institutional design, you already know this isn't just some lofty academic theory. This is the absolute baseline requirement for a functioning, unified, and accountable state security apparatus. Without this strict, merit-based foundation, the legitimacy of the state's monopoly on force is just completely compromised.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact opposite. Tribalism, at least in this specific administrative context, is recruitment influenced by ethnic identity, local loyalty, and political favoritism. It prioritizes the whole idea of our people over actual measurable competence. And we see this reality starkly when we analyze specific modern localized recruitment drives. Take the recent emergence of regional security outfits like Emoticon in the Southwest or Yabuba Agu in the Southeast. Now, to be fair, they were born out of genuine, urgent local defense needs against banditry. But when their recruitment leans heavily into local dialects, specific regional origins, and ethnic ties, it fundamentally weakens broad professionalism and completely fractures any real sense of national accountability. Consider the profound structural divide between these two models we're looking at here. On one side, a constitutional force is strictly loyal to the nation, purely merit-based, and sworn to protect all citizens equally. Conversely, an ethnicized force is inherently loyal to a specific tribe, deeply identity-based, and fiercely focused on protecting only our people. I mean, think about how this actually alters behavior in the field. If an officer's authority stems from their ethnic identity instead of their constitutional duty, their enforcement of the law is inherently going to be biased. They aren't really upholding the law anymore, they're aggressively guarding their turf against perceived outsiders.
Let's transition to Section 3, homeland power monopolies, elite capture of regional security.
Let's break this down like meticulous investigators. Local political elites often intentionally dominate the recruitment process of these homeland security networks. They carefully orchestrate this tactic under a very public justification, consolidating regional authority and protecting the local populace from outside threats. Sounds good on paper, right? But the dark truth is the democratic impact. These shadowy political alliances effectively capture the security apparatus just to maintain power monopolies. Instead of upholding justice, these ethnicized forces are frequently weaponized by politicians. They use them to silence political opposition, to intimidate ethnic minorities living within the state, and to critically weaken the democratic balance of the entire region. Frankly, it's a highly calculated power grab, cleverly disguised as community defense.
Which brings us to Section 4, Invisible Social Borders, the Psychology of Fear and Control.
So, the crucial point is really captured here. Tribalized security systems can psychologically divide a nation even when national borders remain absolutely unchanged. Think about it. Even if the official geographical map of Nigeria looks perfectly whole and unified on paper, physical checkpoints manned by ethnically biased guards create deeply ingrained mental boundaries. You begin to have a severely fragmented map in the minds of the everyday citizens, where invisible lines are drawn not by geography but by fear, suspicion, and ethnic control.
The fallout from this is massive. We're talking severely reduced trust among citizens, restricted physical movement, economic fear for non-indigenous travelers, and just a rapid increase in ethnic suspicion. Imagine the chilling, everyday experience of a merchant, a student, or really any civilian traveling across state lines for work. As an outsider, a non-indigenous citizen, navigating unfamiliar territory, a totally routine traffic stop suddenly feels like a life-or-death encounter. The perceived hostility and the very real threat of prejudiced treatment means that citizens quite literally no longer feel safe in their own country, simply because they've crossed an invisible ethnic border.
Next up is Section 5, the cost of division, institutional and social damage.
Let's move to the structural side and see how this builds, because there is a direct, highly dangerous correlation between local bias and national instability. It's like a cascading domino effect. It begins with a single, seemingly isolated policy failure, ethnic bias in recruitment. But that rot quickly infects the whole system, leading straight to widespread distrust in law enforcement. When people realize the local police only protect their own, what happens? They take matters into their own hands. That triggers immediate retaliation between communities. This sparks terrible cycles of violence that state governments struggle to contain. And ultimately, this spirals directly into long-term national instability. It is a tragic, textbook example of how a failure in administrative accountability can completely rot the institutional foundation of an entire nation.
Let's pivot to solutions in Section 6, a unified security model, rebuilding national cohesion.
To actually fix this paradox, we need a totally new structural blueprint. We need strictly merit-based recruitment that is completely blind to ethnicity. We need equal justice and fairness firmly embedded in every single level of training. And crucially, we need officers wholly committed to protecting all citizens equally, deliberately fostering a national identity over mere territorial dominance. I mean, for the state to truly function and thrive, a diverse citizenry has to be able to look at a uniform and immediately trust that it represents protection, period, regardless of their own ethnic background or the specific region they just happen to be driving through.
Before we wrap up, I want to ask you a really provocative question, and I want you to sit with it. Can true national security exist without justice and unity? For all you political science students analyzing this, I urge you to really deeply consider the mechanics here. Is long-term structural stability even possible if the foundation itself is fractured along tribal lines? A house divided against itself, enforced by its own biased security forces, simply cannot stand. There's just no way.
So the ultimate takeaway is this: true security comes from competence and unity, not tribal fear or territorial dominance. This explainer really reveals that the unbreakable shield of any nation is its shared identity and the equal application of the law. Keep that powerful, game-changing thought in mind as you continue to study the future of state building, federalism, and administrative accountability. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive analysis. Keep questioning the structures around you, keep analyzing the data, and I'll see you in our next explainer.